The thunder lizard is officially back. For over 100 years, science told us that the Brontosaurus, the most iconic giant of our childhood, never actually existed. They called it a clerical error, a ghost of the Bone Wars, and forced us to call it Apatosaurus instead. But in 2015, a groundbreaking forensic study using massive data and advanced algorithms flipped the script, proving the scientific establishment was wrong all along. The legend wasn't just a mistake. It was a 17-ton masterpiece of nature hiding in plain sight. Welcome to the resurrection of the century. To understand why the Brontosaurus disappeared, you have to understand the sheer, unadulterated chaos of the late 19th century American West. This was the era of the Bone Wars, a period of scientific history so cutthroat it makes modern political scandals look like a tea party. To two men, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, hated each other with a passion that burned hotter than a Wyoming sun. They weren't just looking for fossils, they were looking for immortality. They were obsessed with being the first to name a new species, regardless of the quality of the excavation. In 1879, Marsh's team hit the jackpot at Como Bluff, Wyoming. They unearthed a skeleton so massive, so gargantuan, that Marsh felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. He christened it Brontosaurus excelsus, the noble thunder lizard. It was a PR masterstroke. The world fell in love with the name. It sounded powerful. It sounded ancient. It sounded like the ultimate dinosaur. People flocked to museums to see the sheer scale of a creature that could shake the ground with every step. But in his desperate, frantic race to beat Cope, your Marsh made a fatal error. His Brontosaurus was missing a head. Rather than wait for more evidence, his pride took the wheel. He grabbed a skull from a different quarry, later found to belong to a Camarasaurus, and slapped it onto the body. He created a Frankenstein's monster of the Jurassic. He gave the world a masterpiece built on a lie, and the scientific community was about to make him pay for that haste for the next 112 years. The tragedy began in 1903. A young paleontologist named Elmer Riggs took a cold, hard look at Marsh's prize. He noticed that the Brontosaurus looked suspiciously like another dinosaur Marsh had named 2 years earlier, the Apatosaurus. According to the strict, unforgiving rules of scientific nomenclature, the first name published is the one that sticks. This rule exists to prevent confusion, but in this case, it caused a cultural catastrophe. Riggs declared that the differences were too minor to matter. He argued that the Brontosaurus was just a slightly more robust version of the Apatosaurus. And just like that, with the stroke of a pen, the thunder lizard was erased. It was demoted to a mere junior synonym. The name Brontosaurus was officially dead in the eyes of academia. Think about the sheer audacity of it. For decades, museums had to quietly change their labels. Teachers had to correct their students. The scientific world turned its back on one of the most iconic creatures to ever walk the earth. By the mid-20th century, if you called it a Brontosaurus, you weren't just wrong. You were considered scientifically illiterate. It became a symbol of outdated knowledge, a punchline for those who didn't stay current with the fossils. But here is where the story gets truly incredible. Even though the scientists had killed the Brontosaurus, the public refused to let it die. The name was too powerful, too evocative to be buried in a dusty academic journal. It was the thunder lizard, and no dry scientific rule could take that away from the collective imagination. Sinclair gas stations put the green silhouette on every street corner. The U.S. Postal Service issued a Brontosaurus stamp in 1989, causing an absolute firestorm among pedantic scientists who accused the government of promoting fake science. It was a war between the heart and the textbook. Children's books, Hollywood movies, and toy aisles kept the flame alive. Generations of kids grew up loving a dinosaur that didn't exist. It was a rare moment in history where the collective intuition of the public was at war with the settled science of the era. And as it turns out, the public was right all along. Fast forward to 2015. A team of European researchers, led by Emanuel Tschopp, decided to settle the debate once and for all using technology that Elmer Riggs could only dream of. They didn't just look at a few bones. They conducted a massive 5-year digital autopsy of the entire Diplodocid family. They scrutinized every bump, every groove, and every ridge on hundreds of fossil specimens across 20 different museums. We are talking about 477 different physical traits analyzed across 81 different specimens. This wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. This was big data meeting deep time. And they used a sophisticated statistical algorithm to determine how much variation is needed to call something a new genus. They set a grueling 20% threshold. If the differences exceeded that mark, the name comes back. They looked at the neck, the tail, the hips, and even the tiny ankle bones. They found that the Brontosaurus had a higher, thinner neck compared to the bulky powerlifter neck of the Apatosaurus. They found unique shapes in the shoulder blades that suggested entirely different muscle attachments. The evidence was stacking up like a skyscraper of bone, and the results were explosive. The Brontosaurus didn't just meet the criteria, it smashed through them. The math proved what the eyes of the public had seen for a century. The Brontosaurus and the Apatosaurus were as different as a lion and a tiger. And the thunder lizard wasn't a synonym, it was a sovereign. When we look at the resurrected Brontosaurus today, we aren't just looking at a long-necked dinosaur. We are looking at a 17-ton miracle of biological engineering. Imagine a creature as heavy as 3 African elephants, stretching 72 feet from nose to tail. This was a biological skyscraper walking across the floodplain. How does an animal that big even breathe? If it had lungs like ours, they would have to be nearly 800 gallons in volume. A physical impossibility. It would have been crushed by its own internal weight. Nature's solution was genius. It gave them bird-like air sacs. These weren't just for breathing. They invaded the bones themselves, hollowing them out to make the skeleton light yet incredibly strong. It was a skyscraper made of flesh and air. And this avian-style respiratory system meant they were more efficient, more energetic, and more alive than the slow, swamp-dwelling monsters we used to imagine. And that neck, oh, that magnificent neck! It wasn't just a reach extender for grazing. It was a high-tensile suspension bridge. Massive ligaments acted like steel cables, allowing the Brontosaurus to sweep its head across the landscape like a giant vacuum cleaner, consuming hundreds of thousands of calories a day without moving a single foot. It was the ultimate stationary grazing machine. It could clear an entire forest canopy while standing perfectly still, saving precious energy that a 17-ton animal simply cannot afford to waste. But don't let the peaceful herbivore tag fool you. A Brontosaurus in a bad mood was the most terrifying thing in the Jurassic. When a predator like Allosaurus approached, it wasn't walking into a meal. It was walking into a math problem it could never solve. The Brontosaurus was a fortress that fought back. The neck of the Brontosaurus was a flesh mace. Research suggests it was incredibly muscular and flexible, capable of delivering strikes with several tons of force. Imagine a 20-foot whip made of solid muscle and bone crashing into your ribs at high velocity. It could snap the neck of a predator in a single blow. And then there was the tail, a weapon so fast it could allegedly break the sound barrier with a 200-decibel crack that sounded like a canyon collapsing. This wasn't a defenseless cow. It was a 17-ton fortress of doom. It was a masterpiece of defensive evolution, designed to survive in a world where everything else wanted to eat it. And the Brontosaurus wasn't just an inhabitant of its world, it was the architect of it. These giants were landscape engineers. By consuming massive amounts of vegetation, they cleared pathways through dense forests, allowing sunlight to reach the floor and new plants to grow. Their footprints became microhabitats, and their migration patterns dictated the lives of thousands of smaller species. They moved in coordinated herds, acting as a wall of bone and muscle to protect their young. They were the keystone of the Morrison Formation, the absolute rulers of the ecosystem. To think that we almost lost this animal to a paperwork error is staggering. Their existence redefined the very botany of the Jurassic era. They were the true kings of their domain, shaping the earth with every heavy footfall. And the resurrection of the Brontosaurus is the ultimate testament to the beauty of science. It proves that no fact is too settled to be questioned. It shows us that even the most prestigious museums and the most brilliant minds can be blinded by their own rules and limited data. It teaches us humility in the face of the unknown. When the scientific world lost Pluto as a planet, it felt like a piece of our childhood died. But when we regained the Brontosaurus, it felt like justice. It validated the wonder of every child who ever looked at those bones and felt that Thunder Lizard was the only name big enough to describe such majesty. It was a victory for curiosity over dogma. Today, we can finally say it with pride, without fear of correction, and with the full weight of mathematical proof behind us. The Brontosaurus is back. It was never a mistake. It was a hidden titan, waiting in the shadows of our own misunderstanding for 112 years, just waiting for us to catch up to the truth. What an incredible time to be alive. We live in a world where legends can come back to life, where the thunder has finally returned to the Jurassic, and where we've learned that sometimes the greatest discovery of all is realizing just how much we still have to learn. The Brontosaurus is no longer a ghost. It is a breathing, thundering reality that reminds us to never stop looking at the evidence, never stop questioning the consensus, and never, ever stop dreaming about the giants that once walked among us. The Thunder Lizard has returned to its throne, and the world of paleontology will never be the same again.